Good. Okay, good morning. Today's daf is daf Peites, and we're going to pick up a little bit down the way in the daf Amreb Abba, which is about 12 lines down. So, Amreb Abba, Kasha Gezel Hanechol, that you see that if someone stole something and actually ate it already, that's a difficult situation. Shafilu tzadikim gemurim einan yecholin lahachziro. That even absolute tzadikim, people who are totally tzadikim, aren't able to return it. So there's a challenge in addressing. In other words, once you've consumed something that was stolen, there's a challenge in addressing it. Where do we see this? Shenemar, because it's written in the pasuk that when Avram Avinu was having a conversation, obviously Avram Avinu was having a conversation with the Melech Sodom. We dealt with this a little bit yesterday at the top of today's daf, which is Michut v'Yatzroch now. He didn't want to take anything from the Melech Sodom. So Avram Avinu said, Biladai rak asher achlu hana'arim. He said that I don't want anything, but only that which the Na'arim, which the lads, which the people who came and fought together with Avram Avinu, that which they ate. So you see that there's some element to which that there was something that was taken that is being referred to as Gezel, and you see that ultimately Avram Avinu couldn't give it back because they had already eaten it. So a lot of questions exactly how to understand this. You can understand it at a simple level that something wrong was done here, that this was a case of Gezel. Although the challenge is because it's the Mefarshim struggle to understand generally what was the Gezel that went on here, because the Melech Sodom was telling him you can have it. Not only that, as the victor in the war, that's common to have the spoils. At some level, though, it seems the Gemara is saying something is wrong, and it's not. And you might say maybe it's just the issue of these Na'arim. It's not Avram Avinu's issue, but they were fighting with him at some level, supporting him. So maybe that was the challenge. One of the things I was thinking, you see that generally people translate Rashi. Rashi top line says Shelo ratza lehanus min hagezel, that Avram Avinu didn't want to be nana from Gezel. And they try to figure out what is it that Avram Avinu, why was it a Gezel for Avram Avinu to take it? But maybe what we're dealing with here is the fact that maybe Rashi is referring to the fact that the money that the Melech Sodom had was things that were taken illegitimately, which would make that Gezel. And that's what he wasn't able to return, which would be similar to when someone steals from someone they don't know who it is. So we say it's Tshuva is kasha because you don't know who to return things to. And we say generally you should give something that supports the Rabbim in that instance. There's an interesting Ksav Sofer. The Ksav Sofer brings from his father, the Chassam Sofer. The Ksav Sofer is dealing with the question of why ultimately didn't Avram Avinu actually give back even what the Na'arim ate. So maybe you could say that maybe you could just say very simply that he didn't have to. In other words, the idea would be that since they took it generally with some degree of license, they didn't have to return it, and there was no point to return it because when we return a gezel, you're not. In other words, it's a lav hanitik la'aseh. We talk about this. That's why you don't get malchus. So if you steal something, you should give it back. But that doesn't mean it's as if you never stole it. So since in this case it wasn't really gezel, so they took it. Giving it back wouldn't help anything. So maybe that's why he didn't give it back. But the Ksav Sofer is dealing with this question, and he tries to figure out why. And he says, he uses it to answer this. He says something from his father, Chassam Sofer, which was dealing with the question of why was this not a problem of Lo Sachanim? So if Avram Avinu was entitled to the money that he captured, so why not? In other words, then you can't give something to a guy for no purpose. So you're benefiting the guy. So if really Avram Avinu was entitled to all of these riches, then what right did he have to give it to the Melech Sodom? So the Chassam Sofer says on that, he says that this is a support for the view. The Ramban says this view is brought by the Magen Avram. The Chidush Aran talks about this. The idea that if someone, in other words, the Isser of Lo Sechanim is you can give benefit to a guy for no purpose as long as you have some benefit. In other words, that it's some benefit to yourself, right? So that's his point. So the idea was that in this case, that's why, as the Chassam Sofer points out, you would have thought, why did Avram Avinu say, because I don't want them to say that Ani Yesharti es Avram, that the Melech Sodom could say that I made Avram rich. So the question is, once he was giving him back the money, why did he have to tell him that's why I don't want to benefit you? He should have just been quiet, and the Melech Sodom would have appreciated that he gave him back the money. But the Chassam Sofer says that's the reason he needed to say it, is because he said that I don't. In other words, he was giving a reason why it was to his own benefit. He didn't want to take gezel, but he was giving a reason why it was to his own benefit. He was saying, I don't want people to say that I benefited. Once he does that, so then this falls into a category he was doing it for himself, not for the Melech Sodom. So that's the Chassam Sofer. So the Chassam Sofer says that if you want to, you could extend that a little bit and say maybe that's why he didn't. That's why he didn't return what the Na'arim had eaten, because that he can't say. In other words, the whole rationale why he was able to give anything back, and it wasn't a violation of Lo Secharim, was because he was doing it for himself, that people shouldn't say that the Melech Sodom made Avram Avinu rich. But the food that the Na'arim had already eaten, that no one would say that he made him rich. So therefore, he didn't have a rationale that would support going against Lo Secharim, and maybe that's why he didn't return the assets. Okay. Continues the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Elazar, Mishum Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, Kol Makom Shatzo Motzei Devarav Shel Rabbi Eliezer Beno Shel Rabbi Yossi Aglili Bahagada. That any time you find a Agadic statement, a Divrei Agada from Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Asei Aznecha Ka'afar Chesas, that you should make your ear like an afar cheses. An afar cheses is something that would was like a funnel that where they would thresh the wheat. The wheat would come down. So I guess the idea, when you have divrei agada, you take it as something large and you narrow it down to get the point out of it. But he says in any event, you should always listen carefully when he says something divrei agada, and he quotes the pasuk, that this is the pasuk in Devarim. It says lo merubchem. The pasuk says, the plain way to understand the pasuk is that Hashem didn't desire you, Klal Yisrael, because of your great numbers. That Hashem chose you, to the contrary, you're a very small nation, and that's why the Rebbeinu Shalom chose you. But here we're going to darshan the pasuk a little different. He says, the Rebbeinu Shalom said to Klal Yisrael, Chushkani bachem, I have a cheshek for you. I desire you, shafilu b'shah shani mashpil lechem gedula, that even at the time that I grant to you, shafa, I grant to you flow of blessings of greatness, atem mimatin atzmechem lefanai, that you still are mimayat yourself in front of me. So therefore, as Rashi explains, so the way we're explaining the pasuk, so he says, "Lefi she'ein atem marbim atzmechem el mamaticha," because you don't make yourself great. Lefika chashak bachem. Therefore, I desire you, because ki atem hamaat mamitim atzmechem ba'anava, that you are people who make yourself small, that you practice anava. So the way they're understanding the pasuk is lo merubchem mikol ha'amim, the fact that you don't make yourself great amongst the nations, chashak Hashem b'chem. That's why Hashem desires you. Vayivchar b'chem. He chose you. Ki atem hama'at mikol ha'amim, because you're the ones who make yourself small. Even when I make you great, you make yourself small. So where do we see this? He says, Nasati gedulo la'Avram. I gave greatness to Avram Avinu. So v'agad l'shemecha, I'm going to make you great. Amar Lafana, and Amar Lafana, and he said, Avram Avinu said in front of me, I made him great. And what did he say to me? He said, Va'anochi afar ve'efar. We had this yesterday, that he said, I'm like dirt and like ash. So you see that the Rebbeinu Shalom made him great, but Avram Avinu still made himself small. L'Moshe v'Aaron, Amar, to Moshe and Aaron, to Moshe and Aaron he also made them great. And Amar, and what did Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron say? V'nachnu ma. What are we? We're like nothing. It says, "Boker isem as kvod Hashem." This Moshe Rabbeinu speaking to Klal Yisrael. He says, "In the morning you're going to wake up. You see the kvod Hashem. B'sham was tulunosechem, that he heard your complaint that you didn't have food. To tulunosechem al Hashem." He says, "V'nachnu ma." What are we? We're nothing. Kisalino aleinu. We're just agents of the Rebbeinu Shalom. So you see that Moshe and Aaron were given gedula, and yet they considered themselves nothing. LeDavid, David was given greatness. He was made the Melech of Klal Yisrael. Amar v'anochi toilas v'loish. This is the pasuk in Tehillim. It says that I am a worm and not a man. Cherpas Adam, the disgrace of the people. B'zuyam, the one who's again disgraced amongst the nations. So David HaMelech put himself down, even though the Rebbeinu Shalom gave him Gedula. He says, "Aval ovdei kochavim einon kain." But by outside of the Jewish people, it's not that way. Nasati Gedula Nimrod. I gave Gedula to Nimrod. Nimrod was the Melech in the times of Avram Avinu. And what happened? So he got some Gedula, and Amar Hava Nivnu Lanu Ir. That this is obviously the pasuk that's written by the Dor Aflaga. He says, "Vayamru Hava Nivnu Lanu Ir." Let's make a city, Migdal, and a tower, Verosha Bashamayim, and its head is going to be in the heavens. V'nasa Lanu Shem, and we're going to make a name for ourselves. So basically, he went to battle with the Rebbeinu Shalom. So he gave Nimrod some Gedula, and Rashi points out that the name Nimrod itself is reminiscent of this, because Rashi says, he says, Melech Badar Flaga, that Nimrod was the king in the time of the Dar Flaga. Lekach Nikra Shmo Nimrod Shehimrid Kol Ha'olam B'Machusal Al Kadosh Baruch Hu. That he rebelled. He tried to get everyone from in his kingdom to rebel against the Rebbeinu Shalom. Where else do we see this? We see it by Paro Leparo, that he made Paro great. Paro was a great king throughout the world at that time. And what happens? Paro says, Amar, then when Moshe Rabbeinu comes to him the first time, he says, Vayomer Paro, Mi Hashem asher eshma v'kolo l'shalach es Yisrael. He says, who is Hashem that I should listen to his voice to send forth Klal Yisrael? Lo yadati es Hashem, that I don't know Hashem, v'gam es Yisrael le'ashaleach, and I won't send out Klal Yisrael. So you see, Paro was given greatness, and he became arrogant. L'sancherev, so Sancherev was a great king, had captured really all of the world. And it says, Sancherev Amar, so this is the pasuk over there in Malachim Beis, which says, Mi b'chol he'ar atzos asher yitzilu es arza miyadi. He says, who is there amongst all the gods of the lands that was able to save its land from me, i.e. he had captured everything, except Yushalayim, ki yatzil Hashem es Yushalayim miyadi. He says, show me any other God who is able to save his people, and neither will Yerushalayim be able to save it. So he was starting up with the Rebbeinu Shalom. Nebuchadnezzar also was a great king, Amar, and he said, Ela abamse of, that this is the pasuk in Yeshaya. He says that I'll go up to the heights, Adama le'elyon. I compare myself to the one on high, to the Rebbeinu Shalom. So he considered himself like a god. Lechiram melech tzur Amar, that to Hiram, who is the king of Tyre, which was Tyre's north of Eretz Yisrael, but was a major seaport. And what happened? He was given a great king. It's a long pasuk, but in Yecheskel it says Ben Adam. He says, son of man, Emerl and Agid Tsar, to tell the prince of Tsar, Komar Adonai Elohim Yan Geval Libcha, since you've lifted your heart, Vatomer. Vatomer Elani, and you say that I'm a god. Moshav Elohim Yoshavti B'Leiv Yamim. He says that you say to yourself that you've sat as a god in the heart of the seas. V'yata Adam V'Loel. You're a man and you're not a god. V'Siten Libcha K'Leiv Elohim, and yet you've put your heart like the heart of God. And the pasuk continues there in Yecheskel, where he foretells the downfall of Hiram Melech Tzor. But what do you see? You see that he gave him greatness, and he went and considers himself like a god. And Rashi points out the story with Hiram, that he built himself Shabanalo Shiva Rekiyim Shonachoshes. He made this copper structure with 7 levels, and he went up and sat on the 7th level. So we know there's seven heavens. So Hiram considered himself like a god, and so you see that people abused the godless, the gedula that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave them, as distinct from those in Klal Yisrael that we talked about before, who gave it up, who put themselves down when they were giving gedula. Amar Rava v'Temer Reb Yochanan. So it says, Rava says, and some say Reb Yochanan, Gadol shenemer b'Moshe v'Aaron, Yoser mima shenemer b'Avram. He says that which was said by Moshe and Aaron was even greater than that which was said by Avram. The ilu b'Avram ksiv, because by Avram Avinu, what happened? Avram Avinu said, Vanochi afar ve'efar. He said, I'm like dirt and like ash. Now, dirt and ash are pretty low, but there's still something. It's something, dirt and ash. That Moshe and Aaron said, and us, what are we? We're nothing. So you see, whereas Avram Avinu compared himself to dirt and ashes, that Moshe and Aaron compared themselves to being nothing. So the Ksav Sofer, I guess 2 in a day, but the Ksav Sofer says on this also something interesting. He points out, he says part of the issue of where you see the godless of Moshe and Aaron different than Avram Avinu, he said that Avram Avinu, when Avram Avinu said Anochi Offer ve'efer, was when he was approaching the Ribono Shel Olam to daven on behalf of Sodom. So he says, can I approach you on this? Can I, even though I'm Offer ve'efer, let's negotiate about saving Sodom. So when Avram Avinu said Offer ve'efer, that I'm dirt, he was saying, I, relative to you, the Ribono Shel Olam, am dirt. So that's a level. But in other words, many people can recognize that relative to the Ribono Shel Olam that they're dirt. But when Aaron and Moshe said, V'nachnu ma, what are we? We're nothing. They were speaking to Klal Yisrael. So the ability that they had not only to put themselves down relative to the Ribono Shel Olam, but to put themselves down relative to the nation and to people who are complaining, that was they're godless. The Satmar Rebbe used to say that the fact that Avram Avinu said Offer ve'efar and didn't put him, in other words, he said because there's a limit to how much he can put himself down. Why? Because he lived in a dar of Rishayim. So if the person who's responsible for holding up the dar and holding the morality lets himself down too far and puts himself down to the people, then he's going to end up in a bad place. So he said he puts himself down relative, I'm like Offer ve'efar, but not relative to the nations, which is, we saw by Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron. Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron already were dealing with the Dar HaMidbar, which had achieved greatness, so there they could put themselves down relative to the people. Continues the Gemara, V'amar Rava v'iteimer Reb Yochanan. Rava says, and others say it's Reb Yochanan who says, Ein ha'olam miskayim al b'shvil Moshe v'Aaron. That the whole world stands on the merit of Moshe and Aaron that they said Nachnu Ma. Why? Because Ksiv Hacha, it's written in Nachnu Ma. It says that we are nothing. We're nothing. Ksiv Hasam, and it's written in the pasuk in Eov. It says Netzei Tzafon Tohu, that you should stretch the north over the void. Toila Eretz al B'li Ma, that you should that you hang the earth on Blima, which is like nothingness, but we're saying, it says, on Belima, those who say they are without anything. Belima, without anything. So it's a reference that the whole world stands on the basis of Moshe and Aaron, who consider themselves a Nachnu Ma, on the basis that Ma is Belima. That's the reason that the world stands. Rabbi Eloi, Eino Olam Eskayim El B'Shvil Misha Bolem Es Atzmo B'Shas Meriva. He says that the world only stands on those who are bolem. Rashi says bolem means that they soger is piv, that he closes his mouth. So someone who's silent, who silences himself at the time of fighting, at the time of argument, shenemar tola eretz al blima, that the tola eretz, that the Ribono Shel Olam makes the world stand al blima, on those who are bolem, on those who are quiet when they're being challenged and don't let themselves get dragged into machlokas. Rabbi Avo Amar Misha Mesim Atmo Kamisha Eno, someone who makes himself that the world stands on the basis of someone who makes himself as if he's not shenemar, as it says umitachas zrois olam. So this is the pasuk that we learn in Vizos HaBracha. It says ma'on Elohei kedem, that your resting place is with the eternal God, umitachas ros olam. So the way that's the pashup shot in the pasuk is umitachas, and beneath it is ros olam, are the arms of eternity. But here he's understanding it as the homiletically umitachas, someone who puts himself down. Zros olam are the arms of the world. The idea that someone who puts himself down is the one who's holding up the world. So that's his limud. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, my dechsiv. What's this that's written? This is a pasuk in Tehillim. It says, Ha'umnum elem tzedek tedabrun. So he says, are you telling me that you speak justice, mesharim tishbatu, that you judge fairly, b'nei adam, you son of man? That's the pashup pshat. Rashi in Tehillim says, Ha'umnum is a lashon of emunah, of faith. But our Gemara is going to translate it a little differently, which we're going to say, as follows. So he says, Ma umnaso shel adam olam hazeh. What's the umness? So he's translating ha'umnam not to be like emuna, but rather to be like umnis, a trade, a profession. So what's the profession of man in this world? Yasim atzmo ke'elam. He should make himself like a mute person. Elam is someone who can't speak. So he's saying, what's the job of man is to be silent. Presumably, similarly, not to be a mariva or not to say things that are wrong. I might think, okay, if I'm supposed to be silent, I should be silent all the time. Maybe even I shouldn't say divrei Torah. So the Gemara says, that no, you should speak tzedek. Tzedek is a reference to Torah. Yachol yagiz daito. So I might think, okay, so I shouldn't speak other things, but I could speak Torah, and maybe I'll be, maybe I can have, be proud of myself. Yagis, to lift up the yagis daito, to become haughty. Talmud meisharim tishbetu b'nei adam. So he's understanding, even though Pashup Shas meisharim tishbetu kama b'nei adam, here he's understanding meisharim tishbetu b'nei adam, which Rashi explains kimishar eretz chalaka shenocha lidares, that he makes himself like a flat plain, a flat land that's easy to trample upon. So the idea is he doesn't put himself up above other people, but he makes himself like a flat field that can be trampled. Okay. Now we're going to get back to Chullin topics. Amr Reb Zira v'yitemu Rabbi Bar Yirmiyah. Reb Zira says, and others say it's Rabbi Bar Yirmiyah, mechasim ba'afar irani dachas. That you can use, in other words, when you're doing kisei adam, when you have to cover over the blood of a chaya or an oaf, that you can use the Rashi says the initial thought here is that we're dealing with the ashes. Because we know in irani dachas, if you have a whole city that went, a majority of a city that did avodah zarah, that the whole city is in cherem and gets burned, so you burn everything there. So the idea was that you can use the ashes of the irani dachas to cover over the blood. And the question is, v'amai isurei anahu. It's asur b'ana. Everything on ours when the pasuk says that you make it tel olam, that you make it a pile. It says as kol shlola klil Hashem elokecha v'yisa tel olam l'sibana od. You leave it there. It's asur b'ana. So why are you able to use it for kisei adam? Amar zeiri lo nitzercha ela la'afar afara. That you need it not for. In other words, he said you're right. You not only can you not use ashes, which are asur b'ana, you can't even use the loose dirt. But what can you use? You can use the hard earth. Afar, the dirt of dirt. It says, so the pasuk, v'sarafta be'eish esa'ir. So this is the pasuk in Devarim. So he says that you should, that all of the shalom, all of the booty, whatever is taken from the town, you should gather into its square, and you should burn it. So it says, So he says, so the pasuk's telling you anything that you could just gather and burn, you should gather and burn. But something that you're going to have to separate or break off and then gather and then burn, that's not included. So therefore, the hard earth, which has been there, and in order to get it and put it in the pile that you're burning, you'd have to dig it, you'd have to separate it. That's not included in what needs to be burned. So therefore, it's not asur ba'ana. So his point was teaching you this exact point, that for kisei adam, you could use the hard ground underneath the irani dachas, and that's not asur ba'ana. The Rava says a different answer how you could use it, even though the ashes, and going back now on the ashes of the irani dachas, Rava says the reason you can use it because mitzvahs la lehanas nitnu. That mitzvahs weren't given for hana. In other words, this is a concept in many places. The idea is that the reason we do mitzvahs, as Rashi says here, is because gzeres melech hi aleim, that it's the decree of the king, the Rebbeinu Shalom told us to do it. That's the reason we do mitzvahs. To the extent that there is some ancillary benefit, that we get some hana out of doing the mitzvah, that's not considered hana, because all you're doing is you're doing the Rebbeinu Shalom's command. So therefore, even though you cannot use the ashes of an irani dachas for any other purpose, but to do a mitzvah with them you could do, because that's not considered hana. You're not receiving hana when you do a mitzvah. And anything that you typically think of as hana that you receive, that doesn't have a halacha of hana, and therefore the fact that you're not allowed to be nana from the ashes doesn't preclude you from using it for mitzvah, and therefore you could use it for kisei adam. Okay, so Yasser Ravina v'Kamar lahashmaitza. Ravina was saying this. Mitzvah. Ravina asked Ravina as follows. We we learned shofar shel avodas kochavim lo yitaka bo. So he says the shofar of that's being used for avodah zarah, you can't blow with it. My love, isn't it? In taka lo yatsa. So presumably, what that's saying is that if you're not allowed to use the shofar of avodah zarah, this would be a shofar that you use somehow in connection with serving a god, or maybe an animal that was served as a god, and this was its horn. But in any event, it says you can't use it. Presumably, you're not yotzei. So if you're not yotzei, why are you not yotzei? Because we're going to say that you used something, you got hana from something that was aser b'hana, and therefore, because you're getting an avera from being nana from the shofar of a city of avodah zarah, so therefore it's a mitzvah above avera, and that's the reason you're not yotzei. So from the fact that you're not yotzei is premised on the idea that you did an iser by using the shofar of avodah zarah. But the question is, if it's true that mitzvahs lav lehanas nitnu, that the hana you get from a mitzvah doesn't count, so then why is it a mitzvah ba'avera? There's no avera here. You're allowed to use the shofar of avodas kochavim because you're doing it for a mitzvah, and the fact that whatever hana you get from being the guy who blows the shofar is irrelevant. So the Gemara says, no, you're right. If it was lo yatsa the way you said, maybe that would be different. We'll see in a minute about that. But he says lo. He says the way you should understand it is im taka yatsa. He's saying if you do blow it, then you are yotzei. So Rashi says the lav hana he because it's not hana. L'chatchila mia lo yitaka mishum demiyas. So he says Rashi's pointing out. So what's the reason? In other words, when it said you shouldn't blow with the shofar of avodas kochavim, is not because if you use it you would be over on the hana, because there's no hana, you're using it for a mitzvah, but it's miyas to use it. The Ritva explains that the whole purpose of the shofar is to be ma'oreh rachamim, and that we're trying to go to the Baruch Shalom, and you're going to use the shofar of avodah zarah. It's bizarre. If you're trying to get rachamim to remind the Rebbeinu Shalom, so the same reason, like we don't wear gold sometimes on Kippur because it reminds the Rebbeinu Shalom of the Egel. So at the Yemei Din, the last thing you want to do is remind the Rebbeinu Shalom of avodah zarah that was done. But it's not aser. It's not aser b'han. In other words, you're not over on the iser hana, and therefore you would be yotzei if you went ahead and blew with this shofar. You just shouldn't do that. Similar thing. He asked him, lulav shel avodas kochavim lo yitol. So it says that you shouldn't use the lulav that was used for avodah zarah. So my love im nato lo yotze. So isn't that saying that if you took it you weren't yotzei? So from the fact that you're not yotzei, it must be because of mitzvah ba'avera, which means you were over in an avera. So if you were over in avera, why? If all you did was the mitzvah of lulav, that's not considered hana, and you weren't over on anything. So the Gemara says, lo im nato yatza. You should understand that you shouldn't read it to say that you shouldn't take it and you're not yotzei. Rather, you are yotzei, just l'chatchila, you shouldn't do it again because it's miyas. So that's the answer we've given so far, is saying that when we talk about a lulav or shofar and it says you shouldn't use it means l'chatchila. But b'diavad you could use it, you would be yotzei. So the Gemara asks, v'atanya taka lo yatza, nato lo yatza. But we learned in a brayso that says that if you blew with the shofar of avodas kochavim, or you took a lulav of avodas kochavim, that you're not yotzei the mitzvah. So now the question is, why are you not yotzei the mitzvah? It must be that you were nana from it, and that's why it's a mitzvah above avera, and you weren't yotzei. So what do you see? You see that mitzvahs lehanas nitno, that even if you're doing a mitzvah, you cannot get hana from something that's aser b'hana. So Rabashi says no. You're right. It could be that it means lo yotza, but the reason you're not yotzei is not because you're being nana from a mitzvah. It's mitzvahs lav lehanas nitnu, and it's not going to be an issue of hana. So what's the reason if you're going to tell me that when you blow the shofar of avodas kochavim, or you shake the lulav of avodas kochavim, you're not yotzei, is not because of mitzvah abal ba'aver, but rather we're going to say because there's an inherent deficiency in the mitzvah you're performing, and that's why you're not yotzei. What's that? Amar Rashi hachi hashta. How can you compare it? Hasam amabez shiura ba'inon v'avodas kochavim ketuse machtes shiura. So he says as follows. We've encountered this concept before, that halachically, as Rashi points out, that so the idea is that there's a shear for a shofar and there's a shear for a lulav. Says Rashi, b'shofar kadesh yachzena biyadav v'yir lakan and lakan, that you need to be able to hold the shofar and some part of the shofar comes out on either side of your hand. Kidamrin and Rosh Hashanah, and lulav mafarish from Masechas Sukkah, and we explain in lulav. That we explain in Masechas Sukkah that a lulav shear hadas v'arava shlosha tvachim v'lulav arba. that the lulav has to be a tefach more than the adas and arava. Adas and arava are 3, so you see that a lulav has to be 4 tvachim. V'avodas kochavim, and now this is the concept we've encountered before, as Rashi points out, 3rd line. Avodas kochavim kiven de l'sreifa kaima. Once the halacha is by something that was used for avodah zarah, you need to burn it. So once it's halachas that it needs to be burned, kol ha'amad lisarif kesarif dami. That's something that stands to be burned as if it's already burned, and therefore hilkach shiurahu de kasuse mechtas. So he says, so therefore, like it's considered like it's already burned. It's like ashes. So therefore, even though you're looking at this shofar and it's a complete shofar, you're looking at this lulav and it's a complete lulav, halachically it's considered as if it's broken into particles. And if it's broken into particles, then you're obviously not yotzei the mitzvah of shofar or lulav because you're shaking with a bunch of like pieces of sand. It would be the equivalent of doing that. So therefore, we're saying the reason you're not yotzei by a shofar and a lulav is because you're not reaching the shear of a shofar, which needs to be a tefach, or a lulav, which needs to be 4 tvachim. You're not reaching that shear. Why? Because you're shaking something that's essentially a bunch of disconnected pieces. But so that's the reason you're not yotzei by shofar and lulav. But says the Gemara, hacha kol matam machtis ma'ali lekisoi. But rather, what are we dealing with? We're trying to extend that maybe by, so this has nothing to do with hana, it has to do with shiurim. So, but by kisei adam, the smaller the particles you're going to say it is, the better it is, because the whole point of kisei adam, we dealt with this yesterday, you need thin sand, not thick sand, so the idea is, so if you're going to say halachically, this is breaking up the offer into even smaller pieces than it is, great, nothing wrong with that. So that's the reason that a shofar and lulav are yotzei. What kisei adam is, it has to do with shiurim, and has nothing to do with mitzvahs lav lehanas, with mitzvahs lehanas to lav lehanas nitnu, and therefore it's not a question on the view that says mitzvahs lav lehanas, and that's the reason that you're able to use kisei adam of the irani dachas, because there's no problem with hana because it's a mitzvah, and there's no problem that it's broken up into little pieces by shear, because that's perfectly fine for kisei adam. Hadron loch kisei adam. Says the Mishnah. New parak, we're talking now about Gid HaNasha. Gid HaNasha, that the Gid HaNasha is the sciatic nerve that goes down the leg comes from the spinal column and goes down the leg of the animal. Noig ba'aretz b'chutz la'aretz, it's noig in Eretz Yisrael and chutz la'aretz b'fnei habayis or shloi b'fnei habayis, whether it's in the Beis HaMikdash or not. This is not a halacha that has to do with the Beis HaMikdash. B'chulin u'mikdashin, that it has to do with both stuff that's chulin and kadashim. We're going to see today. We're going to spend some time, although we're not going to complete it, to understand what exactly that means. V'noig b'behemo v'chaya, and it's noig by both an animal and a chaya, as versus the prior prakim we had. So we had also vespino was noig by behema, not chaya. Kisei adam was noig by a chaya, not behema. In this case, Gid HaNasha is whether you have a kosher behema or kosher chaya, that Gid HaNasha applies. B'yerach shel yamin or b'yerach shel small doesn't make a difference. Although we encountered this earlier in the Masechta machlokes, whether it's d'Rabbanan, d'Oraisa, we'll talk about that. But basically, whether it's in the right thigh or the left thigh, ve'ena noig ba'of. But this does not apply in the case of a bird, mipnei she'ein lo kaf, because he doesn't have a spoon. So the idea is that the back thigh of the animal has meat wrapped around it in a way that's round, and so it looks like a spoon. Versus an oaf, while it has meat on its thigh bone, that meat is flat, so it doesn't have the appearance like a spoon. Now, why is it important to have the appearance of a spoon? Because the pasuk that talks about Gid HaNasha in Bereshis, it says, "Al kein lo yochlu b'nei Yisrael's Gid HaNasha asher al kaf hayerach," that you shouldn't eat the Gid HaNasha that's on the spoon of the thigh. So you see that an animal that has meat on the thigh bone that looks to the appearance of a spoon, that's what Gid HaNasha applies. It's not going to apply by a bird. I'm not going to get into it because we don't have time, but a fascinating issue in the poskim, they talk about whether the halachas of Gid HaNasha apply by a human being. Because a human being, if you eat a human being, so it's because a human being does have meat that's rounded, that looks like kaf. Not only that, the entire source of Gid HaNasha comes from Yaakov Avinu, that he struck him on kaf hayarach, right? So this gets into a big discussion in the machlokes as to whether cannibalism is asur midrabanan or midoraisa. So it's very much tied into that sugya. It's an interesting one. Okay, continues. V'noig b'shlil, that the halach of Gid HaNasha applies by a fetus. Our Gemara is going to discuss where we initially understand that to mean even at the very early stages of creation as a fetus that the Gid Anasha applies. We'll deal with that a little more. Rabbi Yehuda says Ein Nog b'Shlil, that it does not apply to the Shlil, the Chelbo Mutter. And therefore its fetus and the chelev that's in the fetus are mutter. We're going to see exactly how to break up that phrase in the Gemara. And a tabach, a butcher, is not neman on Gid Anasha. Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that because it's very difficult, we're going to see again question deraisa d'Rabbanan, but in other words, the nerve breaks off in many different directions and burrows into the meat. So in order to have this kind of meat, you would have to go down into all these levels of the meat and pull out the nerve. And the idea is that the average butcher is not going to take the time to do it properly. So therefore, we don't believe him. In fact, this is a difference to this day. Sfardim do this, but in Ashkenazi communities generally they don't. The Chacham say that the butchers are believed both on the Gid Anasha and on the removal of chelev. And we'll see why they bring up chelev. The Meir did mention chelev. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Mukdashim Pshita. That says, wait a second, you're saying that it applies by both Chullin and Kadshim. So the Gemara says, but that's Pashat. Why? Because an animal has a Gid Anasha from the beginning. The fact that you're then makdish the animal shouldn't change its halacha of Gid Anasha. So what's your point that it's noig? Tosus, the top Tosus, just take a look. He says, Kulo nami pshita. So if you remember, we've dealt with this issue before. Like it lists things that aren't relevant. Like in each case of Osov Espino, of Kisei Adam, and here, like some of the things are more relevant to others. So we know already that sometimes the Mishnah lists things that are irrelevant, that are not irrelevant, but that are pasha, that we know it already, or that it doesn't apply. So Tosas says what's going on here is the Gemara is saying, fine, I get that some things aren't necessarily necessary. I wouldn't have thought otherwise. I didn't have to get into the question of Aretz and Chutz La'aretz because I know that Aretz and Chutz La'aretz is only different for things that relate to the land. There's no element of Beis Hamikdash, B'fnei Abayis, Achar Abayis, but Shalom B'fnei Abayis. But you know, we need to find, basically Tosa says a lot of them are pashut. So why are we asking about kachim? He says that tzarech sheyeh echad letzorech v'agabe tani kulo. He says fine, you could have lots of extra things, but at the end of the day, you need something that's a chiddush, something that tells you an important halacha. So the Gemara is saying we're trying to figure it out by kachim. Why is that not pashut? So the thought is it's pashut. Why? Because Gid Anasha exists from the beginning, and kachim only happens when you're makdish the animal. So it says pshita is pashut mishum da'akdashe pakolei iser gid minei. Are you going to tell me why should the fact that you're makdish animal should cause the Gid Anasha iser to go away? So we say v'chitema. Maybe what it's coming to tell me is it's coming to tell me a chiddush, which is the following, which is I might have thought that isser, that when you have an animal which has Gid Anasha, obviously the Gid Anasha is aser. So I might have thought that if you're then makdish it, that the isser of hektish, that if you were to eat it, that you would only be over on Gid Anasha because ein isser chal al isser, right? So maybe what it's coming to tell you is that despite you might have thought that, nonetheless, the isser of kachim also comes on top of the Gid Anasha isser. That's what we're going to say here. If you're going to say yesh begidim menosein tam, this is something we're going to see machlokas about later. But the idea is that if you say the gidin like the Gid Anasha is something that's nosein tam, that lends that it's considered like meat. V'asi isser mukdashin v'chal al isser gid. So he says. And therefore it's coming to tell you that the isser of hektish comes and goes on top of the isser of Gid Anasha. So maybe that's the chiddush. That's the chiddush that's going on here. So it says Rashi, yesh begidim menosein tam bebasar. So he's saying that if you were to cook a piece of meat that has the Gid Anasha in it, v'ashminan haytana da ocha Gid Anasha shamukdashin lokashtayim. So it's coming to tell you that if you were to eat a piece of meat that's hektish, that you're going to get malchus twice. Achas mishum gid, because one is for Gid Anasha. Shafilu eitzu because even if you consider the Gid Anasha itself to be like wood, meaning we're not getting into the question of whether it's nosein tam by Gid Anasha, because that clearly you're chayiv, because the Torah tells you you're chayiv. A Torah chayiv alav. That's one isser you get malchus for. V'achas mishum mukdashin, and a second for mukdash for hektish yesh bo tam of v'nena min mukdashin. So in order to understand the second lav, you would need to understand that you would have to hold that the gid is something that someone gets hana when eating it. Because what are we saying is the second lav that you're over? The second lav you would be, or the first lav is eating gid anasha. The second one is eating something that's kachim. So the question is, and so if you're eating the gid anasha of kachim, it has to be something you're nana from. So therefore, we need to say that it's nosein tam, which means that it gives you hana. And then when you eat the gid anasha, you'd be chayav both for gid anasha and for kachim. V'shamina minei tarti. And therefore, we're understanding from this chiddush what the Mishnah is telling us two things. Chadad yesh begidim nosein tam. First of all, that gidin are considered nosein tam, and therefore you could be nana from them, and you could be chayav for that. V'chadad the iser chal al iser. And the other is that it's saying that Isser is Chal al Isser. So the question is, why is it Chal al Isser? Because normally we know that that you can't have Isser Chal on Isser. So you could understand that because it's adding an Isser that's more Chomer, because it's Asr Bana, or because Hektish is Asr Bana, or because it's adding on. We have this concept of Isser Kolo, we have Isser Mosif. So the idea is that you're adding on further Isser because you're, and again, it's a broader Isser of Hana and Kachim. So the idea here is we're saying, A, it's something you're nana from, so it means it's nosein tam, and B, Isser is Chal al Isser. And this is to take away from the one who says later in this parak, Ein begidim benosein tam, that gidim are like wood, they're like eights, and therefore you're not nana from them. So the Gemara is saying, maybe that's what it's coming to tell me. It's coming to tell me when it says that it applies by kachim, it means if I eat the gid anasha of kachim, that A, there's nosein tam, and that Isser is Chal al Isser, v'asi Isser mukdashim v'chal al Isser gid. So if that's what the Mishnah was coming to tell us, maybe that was the chiddush. So the Gemara says that doesn't make sense because Hai Mukdashin Noig Begid Mibayle. So he says because according to that, what you're saying is that the Isser of Kachim can come and be Chal on top of the Isser of Gid Anasha is a halacha in Kachim. It's saying that Kachim can apply where there's Gid Anasha. It's not a din in Gid Anasha. So our Mishnah said that Gid Anasha applies by Kachim. If what you're coming to tell me is that Kachim is Chal Isser al Isser, then it's really not telling me that Gid Anasha applies to Kachim. It's saying Kachim applies to Gid Anasha. So that doesn't make sense to be the Chiddush of our Mishnah. So says the Gemara, Ela Kesavar Ein Begidim Enosein Tam. So fine. So we're going to say that that we don't hold like the one. We hold like the one who says that Gidin are not Nosein Tam. Mukdashim Isser Gid Ika Isser Mukdashim Leka. So he's coming to say, maybe it's coming to tell me exactly the opposite. You just told me maybe the chiddush was to tell me that the halacha of kachim applies, which would mean that you hold Isser Chal and Isser and Gid is nosein tam. So he says maybe what the Mishnah comes to say is that when it comes to say he's saying that it's basically telling you that that it is Chal only the Isser Gid is there, but the Isser of Hektish is not there. V'savar Tana Didan Ein Begidim Enosein Tam. He says, and therefore our I'm sorry, that's the Gemara's comment. I'm sorry. So we're going to say that maybe he's coming to tell you that Gidin are not Nosein Tam. So he's coming to say that Gid Hanasha applies by Chullin and Mukdashin, meaning it's the only thing that applies. Hektish does not apply. It's coming to tell you the way you would read the Mishnah is that Bechulin Ubimukdashin, that Gid Hanasha exclusively applies by Chulin and Hektish. Hektish is not Chal Isser on Isser, and that's the Chiddush of the Mishnah. But the Gemara asks a question. So in order to say that, you have to tell me that if our Tana is coming to say that Isser is not Chal on Isser, and that Gidin aren't Nosein Tam, so wait a second, does our Tana agree that Gidin are not Nosein Tam? V'savar Tana Didan Ein Begidim Nosein Tam, is that a valid viewpoint to ascribe to our Tana? Well, Tanam, we learn later in this parak, which is the same Tana, Yerach shenisbashel ba gid anasha im yesh ba benosein tam harezu asura. He says that if you have a yerach, a thigh of an animal that's cooked with the gid anasha in it, so if it is less than echad b'shishim, so it's not batal, meaning it's nosein tam, so then it's aser. So what do you see? You see that the gid hanasha can be nosein tam as long as it's less than a 1:60 proportion, that it's aser. So therefore, your answer to try and say that the Mishnah was telling us that gid hanasha applies exclusively and hektish doesn't apply is premised on saying that it's not nosein tam. But you see that our Tana, the Tana of this parak, holds that it is nosein tam. So we're back to our original question, which is what's the chiddush of telling us that gid hanasha applies by mukdashin? So we're saying elahacha bevladas kachim askinon. So rather, when we talk about that it applies by mukdashin, we're talking about a fetus, and really what we're talking. So we're talking as follows: that it's coming to tell you that when you have a basically, as Rashi points out now, it's going to be. Rashi says, "Behema shlomim sheyolda." If you have a shlomim animal, a hektish animal that gave birth, Vashminan Tana de Masnisen, the Lotema Isim Mukdashim Kadim Vigid Ein Noig B'Shlil. So what he's going to say is, so let me explain this outside, and then we'll do it inside. So the idea here is as follows: that the chiddush that we're coming to say is that we're talking about a vlad of kachim. So you have a kachim animal that has developed a fetus, and so the idea is that at the same time, if we hold, we're going to see in a minute, but if we hold that kachim takes hold at the time that a vlad is first created, right? So then what's going to happen? You're going to have the isser of gid hanasha and kachim take effect at the same time, because gid hanasha obviously only comes into play once the animal exists. And if we're dealing with an animal that's the vlad of a hektish animal, Rashi says a carbon shlomim, that if it's going to be a vlad of a carbon shlomim, then it also then it's also kachim right at that first moment. And therefore, the chiddush of our Mishnah is we just finished saying that maybe ein iser chalal iser, and there's no way to make kachim apply on top of gid hanasha. We're saying no, it's coming to tell you that there's an instance where kachim and gid hanasha can come at the same moment, and then both will apply. So let's just read that inside. He says, we're dealing with a fetus of kachim, because savar, and we hold noeg b'shlil that gid hanasha applies in a fetus. So that basically, as soon as the fetus is created, the gid hanasha iser comes, because savar vladas kachim b'meiman hein kedoshim, and we further hold that kachim, that when you have a carbon that becomes pregnant, that the fetus is also kachim. The iser gid, the iser mukdashim bahadi adadi kasi. So therefore, we found a circumstance where the gid hanasha and the iser kachim both came into being at the same moment, which is when the fetus first became viable or was created, whatever it is. So therefore, that's the chiddush of our Mishnah when it says it applies in Chullin and mukdashin, is dealing with the specific case of a fetus and coming to tell you that both halachas can apply, because one did not precede the other. If one were to precede the other, you have a problem of Isser Chal on Isser. But if they came at the same moment, you don't have that. So the Gemara says, okay, that's a good answer, but I have a problem. If that's the chiddush that you're telling me, Umi matzes mukmaslei b'shlil, can you tell me that when it says b'chulin u'mukdashin, it's coming to tell you the scenario of a fetus, and one of the assumptions inherent in that scenario is that gid starts from the time it's in the fetus. But we learned in the Seifa of the Mishnah, Noeg b'shlil, that was a little further in the Mishnah. It said, Noeg b'shlil, Rabbi Yehuda ain't a Noeg b'shlil. So he says, so Michlal the Reisha la b'shlil askinan. He's saying as follows: if the Mishnah needed to come and tell us later on in the Mishnah that the halach of gid hanasha applies even in the fetus, if you're telling me that in order to understand the earlier part of the Mishnah where it said b'chulin u'mukdashin has to be talking about a scenario where there was a fetus, and that's the way you find gid hanasha and hektish applying at the same moment. So obviously, inherent in that explanation of mukdashim is the fact that gid hanasha is noig by shlil. So I would know it already. So why would the Mishnah need to come tell it to me later? So it must be that the beginning of the Mishnah is not talking about a shlil. So the Gemara says, Hachi Kamar. He says, no, the Mishnah, I do know it from the beginning. I know it from where it says B'chulin U'Mekdashim, because that's obviously premised on that Gid Anasha applies even at the fetus stage. So why does the Mishnah go back and say V'noig B'Shlio? The Gemara is going to say it does that in order to present the machlokas. Davar Zeh machlokas to Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbanan. So he's saying that the Mishnah comes to say this that I told you before, that Kachim applies by Hektish. What's the scenario where Kachim can apply by Hektish? Is only if we're dealing with a fetus. And we assume that both the Isser of Hektish and the Isser of Gid Anasha take effect at the same moment. So you might think that that's universally held. It's not, because only the Rabbanan hold that Gid Anasha takes effect in the fetus, but Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that Gid Anasha does not take effect in the fetus. So therefore, what would Rabbi Yehuda's halacha be? Rabbi Yehuda would say that the Isser Kachim comes as soon as the fetus is created. The Isser Gid Anasha only comes later when the animal is born. So then what's going to happen? You're going to end up with the opposite scenario. Since Ein Isser Chalal Isser, before we discussed the fact that the Gid comes first and then you're Makdish the animal. We're going to have now a case where the Hektish took effect at the creation of the fetus, and the Gid Anasha only comes into effect when it's born, and therefore Ein Isser Chalal Isser, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the halacha would be that in this case there is an Isser of Hektish and there's no Isser of Gid Anasha. So maybe it was coming just to tell you that it's a machlokas. Okay, so the Gemara has essentially answered the question, but now we're going to get into a question of, so in other words, we've explained the latter part of the Mishnah is not a stira to saying that Mukdashin is specifically a case of the fetus. But how have we explained the case? We've basically said that we're dealing with a fetus, that the Isser of Hektish and the Isser of Gid Anasha came at the same moment. And the Gemara is now going to ask, and we're going to leave ourselves off on a cliffhanger, because we're going to ask questions, we're not going to resolve it, we're going to resolve it in Mirz Hashem tomorrow, but let's see what the question is. The Gemara asks, can you really say that both the Isser Gid Anasha and the Isser of Hektish come at the very same moment when the fetus is created? But we learned as follows, Al Elu Tumas Hanazir Megaleach. So this is a Mishnah we're going to have it, we're going to bring it later in the Gemara, but it's a Mishnah in Nazir. It says, on these tumas, a Nazir shaves. So we know, obviously, a Nazir is someone who made a vow of Nazirus. He can't cut his hair. He can't become tummy to mace. He can't drink wine, right? And if he messes up and he does one of those things, so then he has to shave his head and start again. He brings karbanos. So that's what we're talking about here is which tumos. So as Rashi points out, the tumah that you have to start again your Nazirus is specific to tumas mace. It's not, let's say, tumas sheretz or anything like that, which is learned on the pasuk. So the question is, which are the tumos that cause the Nazir to have to start his period of Nazirus again? So the Mishnah says a number of things, but two of them are al mace, when he touches a dead body, al kazayas min mace, and when he touches a kazayas of a dead body. The kashalan, and the Gemara over there in Nazir asked the question, al kazayas min mace megaleach al kulu lo kol shekain. He says, why do you need to tell me that the Nazir has to start again if he touches a kazayas of a mace or if he touches a mace itself? Obviously, if he has to start again for touching a kazayas of a mace, then he would have to start again for touching an entire mace. So what's the point? Rabbi Yochanan explained the answer, lo nitzercha elo nefel shlo nekashru evarav begidin. So he says, what's the case we're dealing with there? We're dealing with a nefel, an aborted fetus, a fetus that died, right? That basically died at a point that the avarim were there, the limbs were there, but the gidin that connect the limbs were not there, right? So therefore, this is a case where you're not going to have kazayas of a mace because the mace doesn't have meat on it, because it haven't got its gidin, its sinews yet. It surely doesn't have meat. So you're not going to have a case where you have a kazayas of the mace, but you already have the beginnings of a fetus, and therefore, so when the Mishnah says that the Nazir has to start again for a mace, it's referring to this kind of thing. It's referring to a fetus that has not yet developed its sinews, it just has a varim, but if it's a complete fetus, at that point, that's considered a dead body, and if it were to touch a Nazir, he'd have to start again. So says the Gemara on the top of Tzadi Amud Aleph, Alma Isim Mukdashin Kodem. So what do you see? You see that an animal, that a fetus can get status as an animal, because you're going to call it a mace, that aspect of development happens before the sinews are created, right? And Gid Anasha is a sinew. So therefore, the Gemara is saying, you were telling me that when the Mishnah, the Chiddush of Hektish, was coming to tell me a scenario where it happens in the fetus. And since in a fetus, the Gid Anasha and the Hektish come at the same time because they both come at the very first moment, and they're both going to apply, the Gemara is asking now, you see from Rabbi Yochanan's explanation of the Mishnah and Nazir, that they don't come at the same moment. The Shilya, the fetus, forms first, and it forms with limbs, and that's considered a body that is called a mace for purposes of Nazir, and only subsequently to the Gidin form. So if that's the correct sequence of creation in a fetus, it's telling you that the body is created first, and the Gidin are created second. So if the body is created first, and Hektish applies at the first moment of creation, so you now have an animal, Hektish takes effect, shortly thereafter the sinews are created, including the Gid Anasha, and it can't take effect because Ein Isser Chal Isser. You were telling me that they start at the same moment. You see from the Mishnah and Nazir that they don't start at the same moment. So Mirz Hashem will continue, or actually the Rav will continue tomorrow to give the answer to this.